The Kremlin was quieter than usual that morning. Snow pressed against the windows, muting the city outside. Inside, Stalin's office hummed with the low whisper of papers and the faint creak of leather chairs. A young officer stepped through the heavy doors, carrying a folder bound with red string. His boots echoed against the marble floors. Each step felt amplified. Every breath could be heard, every movement noted. He placed the folder on the massive oak desk. His hands shook slightly, though he tried to appear calm. Stalin didn't look up immediately. He tapped his pen against the desk, eyes fixed on a map sprawled across the wall. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Report," Stalin said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. "From the Western Front." The officer nodded and opened the folder, sliding the papers across the desk. Stalin's fingers hovered, tracing the lines without reading. Then he stopped. A single word caught his eye. It wasn't bold. It wasn't even emphasized. But in the cold, calculating mind of Joseph Stalin, it was enough. The room seemed to shrink. The officer swallowed, realizing that a word, just one word, could command the pause of an entire military operation. Stalin's eyes flicked from the word to the map. He leaned forward, a shadow falling across the desk, and murmured to himself, "Interesting. Very interesting." The officers around him stiffened. They had seen him pause before, small hesitations that had ended with arrests, disappearances, or worse. No one dared speak. "Explain this," Stalin said finally, voice calm but edged with ice. The officer opened his mouth, then thought better of it. Any misstep could be fatal. Stalin tapped the report again, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the tension. "I want every detail verified. Every line, every word. A single word in a report, and an entire army was frozen." Outside the office, the Kremlin continued its routine. Soldiers marched, clerks shuffled papers. Inside, the gears of paranoia had begun turning, and the consequences of a single word were about to ripple through the Red Army in ways no one could predict. Stalin didn't act immediately. He stared at the report, eyes narrowing, as though the word itself could reveal a hidden betrayal. The officers around him shifted uneasily. Their uniforms were crisp, their faces calm, but inside, fear churned. They knew that under Stalin, hesitation could be fatal. A wrong glance, a stammered explanation, or even a question could be enough to destroy a career or a life. The word repeated itself in Stalin's mind. Delayed. It was innocent enough, a bureaucratic term, a note scribbled by a subordinate. But to Stalin, it became a seed of doubt. "Delayed," he whispered. "Who decided this?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The silence was louder than any words. He leaned forward, tapping his fingers against the table, slow and deliberate. "Every division must be ready. Yet here it says, delayed." The officers swallowed. Even those who had served him for decades felt the weight of that single word. Orders were checked, telegraphs sent, reports cross-verified. Generals scribbled furiously, assistants whispered, clerks ran through corridors, all because of one word that might have been nothing more than a typo. And Stalin watched. He read the report again, line by line, as if the answer to a possible conspiracy could be found between the letters. The tension in the room was suffocating. Outside, the soldiers waited, ready to march, guns polished, boots shining. Inside, the operation was paralyzed. The officers realized it. A single word, a trivial notation, had stopped an army in its tracks. And Stalin's paranoia had transformed it into a test of loyalty, attention, and fear. "Verify everything," Stalin said, almost casually. "Even the smallest detail could betray us." No one dared to breathe. They had learned long ago that in Stalin's world, even a word could carry the weight of death. And now, the consequences of that word were about to unfold. Hours passed, but Stalin did not act. The report lay before him, each line examined with obsessive precision. The officers waited, standing like statues, their eyes flicking nervously between the dictator and the map of the Western Front. Every movement, every breath was scrutinized. A misplaced glance could be fatal. A twitch of the hand, a pause too long, and Stalin would notice. "Who wrote this?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, cutting through the heavy silence. The young officer who had delivered the report swallowed hard. I did, Comrade Stalin." Stalin's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. "Did you mean delayed? Deliberately?" The room went colder. No one dared answer. They all knew the meaning. A question like that was not a formality. It was a threat, wrapped in suspicion. Orders to the front lines were suspended. Messages were intercepted and verified. Every clerk, officer, and assistant in the command chain worked frantically to ensure the accuracy of the report. The army that had been poised for movement was frozen in place, awaiting Stalin's judgment. One officer whispered, careful not to meet the dictator's gaze, "Comrade Stalin, could it be a mistake?" Stalin's lips curled slightly, almost a smile, but his eyes were cold steel. "Mistake? There are no mistakes that go unnoticed, only lies and oversights." The colonel delivering the report felt the room closing in. Each shadow seemed alive, each ticking clock louder than the last. Stalin's paranoia was contagious. Even those who had survived years of purges felt a creeping dread they could not shake. "Verify everything," Stalin repeated. "Every word, every signature, every mark. Do you understand?" The men nodded silently. But in their minds, a chilling thought took hold. The delay, the suspicion, the obsessive scrutiny. It wasn't about the report at all. It was about demonstrating control. A reminder that under Stalin, even a single word could paralyze an army and put a life in jeopardy. Outside, soldiers waited in silence, boots planted in the snow. Inside, the wheels of fear had begun turning, a machinery of dread that could last days, weeks, or even months. And Stalin watched, calculated, waited. The hours stretched into the afternoon. The soldiers outside remained frozen in place, the operation suspended, waiting for orders that might never come. Inside the Kremlin, The tension was unbearable. Stalin's eyes scanned the report again, moving from line to line, word to word. He tapped a finger on the desk. Slow, deliberate, calculating. "Who approved this?" he asked finally, his voice low, but carrying the weight of thunder. The officer who delivered the report dared a small, careful response. "It was merely a notation, Comrade Stalin. Not an order, not a decision." Stalin's gaze locked onto him. "A notation? A notation can stop an army. Do you understand that?" The officer nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Comrade Stalin." "And yet," Stalin said, leaning back, "it might also be sabotage." The room held its breath. Every man knew that Stalin did not speak lightly. Every hesitation, every word could trigger investigation, arrest. Worse. He rose slowly, pacing the office. "We cannot move until every detail is verified. Every division, every officer, every unit." Outside, the wind swept over the Kremlin, but the soldiers could feel it in the city. The ripple of delay, the tension that had paralyzed an army. Stalin stopped, looking at the young officer. "Do you know what happens when I doubt my men?" The officer's lips went dry. He shook his head. "They disappear," Stalin said simply. "Sometimes for mistakes, sometimes for nothing at all. And yet the fear is always real." Minutes turned to hours. The generals whispered. The clerks checked, double-checked, and triple-checked every line of the report. No one dared leave. No one dared speak unless spoken to. Finally, Stalin made a move. He picked up a pen, marked a correction, and issued a cautious order. The operation could proceed, but only after full verification of every unit, every officer, every detail. The room exhaled, though quietly. They had survived the immediate storm. But the fear, the lesson, the reminder that even a single word could halt an army lingered. "Remember this," Stalin said softly, almost to himself. "Control is everything." And with that, he returned to his maps, leaving the officers to wonder if they had just witnessed mercy, or simply the calm before another storm. Days passed, but the memory of the report lingered like a shadow. The army had finally received orders to move, but the delay had left its mark. Soldiers restless, officers tense, the entire command chain haunted by the weight of one word. The colonel who delivered the report walked the corridors cautiously. Every glance at Stalin's office reminded him that the dictator's mind was always watching, always calculating. "Comrade Stalin," he whispered to himself, recalling the voice that had frozen him. "Control is everything." Officers exchanged quiet glances, but no one spoke. They had learned that survival depended not on skill, bravery, or strategy, but on foresight, composure, and the ability to anticipate Stalin's paranoia. Even minor clerks trembled when handling reports, knowing that a single word could ripple through the Kremlin like a shockwave, halting armies and ending careers. Weeks later, the young colonel was reassigned. No arrests had been made, but the lesson was clear. Under Stalin, even the smallest detail carried consequences beyond comprehension. The Red Army had survived, but its officers had been reminded that the shadow of fear ruled every decision. Stalin, meanwhile, returned to his maps, his mind already moving to the next detail, the next report, the next test. To him, this was no overreaction. It was precision. It was control. It was survival.